Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, working their way through spring practice, and you're kind of getting to that point in spring ball where you're starting to hear some guys really emerge and put a stamp on what they're going to mean to this program heading into the 2024 year. Want to dive into some guys that are really standing out and also kind of circle back to some of the questions that we had to start spring practice for Nebraska and talk about are some of those questions being answered for this Cornhuskers program heading into 2024. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the Nebraska Cornhusker fans. I always say this. I had the privilege to watch a game in Lincoln as a Michigan fan. I mean, it is the best fan base across the country. The amount of support y'all show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Y'all know I love talking this program. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with the rocking with the fellas. And without further ado, let's get into this one now. Before we dive into some of the players that are kind of emerging, some of the questions that we're seeing answered, I want to talk about the overall energy around this Nebraska program during spring practice. And really two words come to mind. And the first word I have is reps. These guys, this is a Matt Rhule program, is a developmental program. And you look back to his time at Temple, you look back to his time at Baylor, and you always had those guys that came into the program as walk-ons, as scout team guys, and then emerged as difference makers for those programs. That's not a coincidence. Matt Rhule is one of those coaches that puts kind of energy into every single player on this Nebraska roster. You hear the stories. They're splitting up 3 different fields, letting everybody really play football. And the only way you get better at football is playing. And I think Matt Rhule giving reps to so many different guys on this roster, I think that's really encouraging, not only for the 2024 season, but Matt Rhule is not short-sighted. He wants this program to be sustainable for the next decade, maybe 2 decades. And I think doing that type of stuff really does help Matt Rhule build this program up from a developmental standpoint. The next one is competition. You see the spring league that they're doing. They want these guys competing. They want these guys getting used to operating in high-stress situations and kind of making those winning plays. That's something that Nebraska has really struggled with over the last couple of years when that moment is big as Nebraska playing their best football. Kind of similar to the conversation we just had about you get better at football by playing football. You get better at winning by competing and winning in practice. And I think the vast competition that you're seeing Nebraska have, that's only fostering that winning culture within this Nebraska program. And that really has been that missing piece for this Nebraska team. Now, getting into some of the questions that we wanted to see answered, I think the first one for a lot of Nebraska fans, I think it gets misconstrued in terms of just quarterback play. I'm going to take it a step farther and say, what does the passing attack look like for this Nebraska offense? You go back to last year, it's no secret. I mean, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. That was outside of the top 100. That Nebraska passing attack really struggled to push the ball down the field and hit those chunk plays in that passing attack. And you look at metrics, that is one of the most important metrics that correlates with good offense. Can you hit explosive plays specifically in that passing attack? That's one of the things that I have been most optimistic about for this Nebraska team is you're starting to hear some of those chunk plays manifesting itself on the practice field, right? Not only the quarterbacks playing at a high level, but the wide receivers really stepping up. A guy like Jamal Banks sounds to be that true wide receiver one where you look back for Nebraska last year, there wasn't a wide receiver one on that team. There was not a Jamal Banks where you needed someone to make a play. There wasn't that wide receiver that you could go to. It was a lot of guys that were true freshmen, did not have a lot of experience. Jamal Banks sounding like he's that guy. Very, very encouraging. You have some young guys stepping up, guys like Demetrius Bell, guys like Ja'Cory Barney. I'm really optimistic about this pass-catching unit for Nebraska. And then you look at the quarterback play. I mean, Dylan Rhule, obviously getting a lot of hype, getting a lot of love. It sounds like Danny Kaelin has been a guy that is showing some real potential for Nebraska in that quarterback room as well. And at the end of the day, you look at this Nebraska team and say the quarterback room is in a much better spot than it was last year. And how I want to highlight this quarterback room is you look at Nebraska, they're in a very unique spot in that quarterback room where they only have 3 scholarship guys. two of which are early enrollee true freshmen. You can't name me another set of true freshman quarterbacks that are getting as much opportunity in reps and ability to learn than guys like Dylan Rhule and Danny Kaelin. And I think that certainly benefits this Nebraska team in 2024. But again, talking about sustainability, that is going to massively help these two young quarterbacks down the road as well. You look at true freshmen all across the country at that quarterback position who early enrolled into their programs. They're sitting there fifth, maybe sixth string, not getting much opportunity to really progress during spring practice. You look at these Nebraska quarterbacks, a lot of reps, a lot of opportunity to grow. And I think that's really going to help the development of these quarterbacks. Last storyline on the offensive side of the football. And I mean, I just talked about why I'm optimistic about this team from a passing attack standpoint. I might take that back and say I might be most optimistic for this Nebraska offense because this offensive line, not only can you identify 6-7 guys that you feel really comfortable about, this is a Nebraska offensive line that is probably going to be the best Nebraska offensive line that we've seen in a very long time in Lincoln, and that is absolutely massive, especially for what Matt Rhule wants to do. In terms of you got a young quarterback, you got to make sure those quarterbacks are protected, but you also want to give that young quarterback a strong run game. And you look at the running back room, yes, dealing with some injuries, but we're pretty confident that if that Nebraska running back room stays healthy with the injection of Dante Dowdle, this is going to be a rushing attack that's good. But the offensive line, guys like Micah Mazuka, Justin Evans-Jenkins, you're hearing some good things about Henry as well. I look at this Nebraska offensive line and say, I like what the starting five can be, but I also like what 6, 7, 8 can be as well. And that's really, we've never really said that about that Nebraska offensive line the last couple of years. It's a talented team that has a lot of veteran guys, but it's also a deep offensive line. And that is really important, especially when you look at kind of what Nebraska's trying to do in 2024. And that is being a team that's competing late into November, maybe early December. Having depth along the line of scrimmage going to be massive for this unit. So you start looking at the passing attack, sounds like they're starting to hit some chunk plays. That's massive. You look at the offensive line, you feel pretty good about that. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about this Nebraska offense heading into 2024. Now, you go to the defense, and there was one question I had about this defense. And you look at this defense, and what excites me the most is you have a ton of veteran guys that kind of provide you, one, that high ceiling, but also that leadership. Guys like Nash, guys like Ty Robinson, Isaac Gifford in the back end. But you also have so much young talent on this Nebraska defense, too. And that's, really exactly how you want a Nebraska defense, or defense in general, to look, where you have those proven starters, those proven veterans, but you also have a lot of young talent that's providing that ceiling for this Nebraska defense. The one thing that Tony White has stressed in his press conferences on the spring practice field is turnovers. And that's the one thing that we were banging the table for Nebraska heading into 2024. This defense in 2023 was dominant. It was elite, right? But the one stat that you kind of wish you had more from was the turnover department, a team that only averaged 1.2 turnovers per game. That was 100th in the country, right? Nebraska was top 10 in most defensive statistic categories outside of turnovers, where they weren't even in the top 100. And you look at that Nebraska team from last year and say, man, the amount of havoc they caused, the amount of negative plays, the amount of chaos they were producing, you want to see that havoc and chaos manifest into turnovers. And I think Tony White is really stressing that for that defense. You asked me about what's the next step for this Nebraska defense. I think it is in the turnover department. We know they're going to be very good against the run with how loaded they are in the front seven. This secondary, one of the better units, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. This is going to be a good defense. If it can be a great defense, in my mind, it correlates with forcing more turnovers. You look at top teams from across the country that have won national championships, that have won conference championships. Those defenses, you look at Michigan last year, top 10 in turnovers. That is a must for this Nebraska defense. It's a great way to help a young offense, a offense that we have some question marks about, kind of settle in. If Nebraska to manufacture some more turnovers, that's going to be massive. And it's nice to see Tony White really start banging the table for, hey, we have to be a defense that not only is great at stopping teams, forcing punts, but also helping this team win games by creating turnovers, creating those game-changing plays for this Nebraska team. We say it all the time. I mean, you win college football games winning the turnover battle. Nebraska won 5 games being one of the worst teams in the country in the turnover margin. You won 5 games. What happens if this Nebraska team reverses that trend and that defense starts creating more turnovers, that offense takes care of the football more? You're looking at a team that can be extremely dangerous in 2024. A lot of reason to be excited about what this Nebraska team is doing in spring practice. Cannot wait for the spring game. We'll obviously break that down, continue to talk about what we've been hearing from spring practice. But if you're a Nebraska fan, I mean, hey, you get excited all the time during spring, but this feels like a team that can really be dangerous in 2024. I think Matt Rhule has really dug his hands into what this team is going to look like in 2024. Y'all know I'm fired up. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.